Alright guys, so this is going to be my review of Spider-Man Hobgoblin Lives. This is the infamous Roger Stern comic that pretty much retconned the whole thing of Ned Leeds being the Hobgoblin and Roderick Kingsley becoming the real Hobgoblin like Roger Stern confirmed. There's actually a bit of a funny story regarding this whole comic in that Roger Stern was, he had, his whole thing with the Hobgoblin was that he was going to make it like a mystery of who was the Hobgoblin. And unfortunately, before that all happened, he was fired off the book. He was taken off of the book before he could tell the whole story. The other thing was that he didn't tell anybody, and he forgot to tell anyone who the Hobgoblin was. He couldn't tell the new writer. So funny enough, we fast forward to a little further and to a convention where Marvel's editors at the time were talking, and one person asked, "Who is the Hobgoblin?" And one of the editors at Marvel at the time laughed and said, "Ned Leeds." Well, unfortunately, the writer of Spider-Man took that like, "Oh, Ned Leeds is the Hobgoblin. I'll make Ned Leeds the Hobgoblin." And yeah. So Roger Stern got to do a 3-part comic called Hobgoblin Lives, in which he told the story he wanted to tell and more or less retcon that bullshit whole story because at the time, Ned Leeds had been killed in a one-shot comic called Spider-Man vs. Wolverine. So, yeah, the continuity was already fucked when they revealed, oh, the Hobgoblin was Ned Leeds the whole time, and everyone in the editorial forgot that Ned Leeds was killed in that Spider-Man Wolverine one-shot. So, yeah, it was literally a clusterfuck, and admittedly, you know, you gotta hand it to Stern that he managed to fix a lot of the problems. And I say fix, I use the word fixed loosely. I use that term very loosely because, yeah, there was a lot of hoop jumping he had to do to get, to get where he is with the Hobgoblin, to make Roderick Kingsley the Hobgoblin. If you don't know who Roderick Kingsley is, he is not only the Hobgoblin, he was kind of like he was a philanthropist, and he was like a fashion designer who Mary Jane worked for. He was also like a millionaire. He was like the head of Virgin Mobile at the time. He was this very well-mannered, he was this very attractive, like new age, yuppie kind of businessman that were coming up in that time period that the Hobgoblin was created. So that was the big thing with with going on with Spider-Man and Hobgoblin. Now, this comic, pretty much, the story is like I said, it's more or less finally revealing that Kingsley was the Hobgoblin. And in here, it's an interesting story. It is now, the trade I have chronicles the 3-part miniseries of Hobgoblin Lives, as well as the sequel 3-part story in Spectacular Spider-Man, in which Kingsley and Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, kind of team up / fight each other. So, yeah. Also, this image right here has nothing to do with the comic. I just thought it was funny and thought it would, get your attention. If you are wondering what this comic is from, it's from the Hobgoblin Axis tie-in from the event Axis. Like I said, give it up to Stern, who really had to jump through hoops to say that, oh no, Ned Leeds wasn't the Hobgoblin, it was Kingsley. Ned Leeds was just kind of, he was the patsy, he was mind-controlled and all of that. And I can only imagine, I really want to know, had it not been for, Stern getting fired off the book, I'm really curious to know how, exactly his story would have gone without the whole retcons. Yeah. But no, it's him trying to fix a mess someone else made, and here he is trying to do the right story. I will admit that it is, unfortunately, I already know the whole story like, before I read this comic, I already knew who the... I kind of already knew who the Hobgoblin was before getting this comic at MegaCon. But having said that, I just wanted to know, like, who are the other people? Because I literally forgot there were a bunch of other suspects. I mean, I even forgot that there was a time when J. Jonah Jameson was suspected of being a possible candidate for the Hobgoblin. That was another strong possibility. that was kind of permeated among the the stuff that Stern was doing. There was also a few other characters. Some of them actually get killed off in here, so it kind of crosses through the list pretty well. Although, admittedly, you could probably guess when this comic was over, like when this comic was coming to a close, you could probably guess already that it was going to be Kingsley in some grand capacity. The three-part sequel story called Goblin's Gate is interesting. The artwork, though, is something to be desired, because there are just straight-up derp faces multiple times in this comic. There are just some straight-up derp faces in this comic that just made me go, wow, no. That comic is pretty much Osborn, who at the time had come back to life after being impaled, and now he's trying to get his credibility back by saying, oh, I was in Europe the whole time. And he discovers that Kingsley has a journal that he wrote that confirms that, yes, he was the Green Goblin, so now he has to work, he forces Roderick to work with someone who is covering for him as the Green Goblin. I forget who that is in that comic, so, yeah, sorry about that. And Spider-Man's kind of caught in the crossfire. It's a neat little story, but I think the artwork is something left to be desired. Stern writes that book, probably because Hobgoblin's his boy, so he probably didn't want anyone else writing that at the time. All in all, this is a pretty fun story. I would say that if you're a fan of Spider-Man, it's worth checking out. Even when I picked this up, Chris, Mount Vernon kid, who was with me at the time, said, you know, I know what it is, but I've never read that comic, so yeah. So I figured this was kind of fun. If you were looking for, if you're a fan of the Hobgoblin, which I know there's actually a good number of people who like the Hobgoblin more than Green Goblin, which surprises me. Not to say he's a bad character, I'm just saying, like, it just kind of always surprised me that there is, like, a good number of Hobgoblin fans out there, probably because of the 90s cartoon and a few other things. But yeah, I would say check this out. This is definitely a look on my behalf. Nothing too spectacular, especially if you know the gag already, so yeah. But anyway, so you guys tell me, so hope you all enjoyed this review, and I will see you guys later.